the Association for Middle Level Education, and you are joining us for another wonderful Google Hangout with one of our AMLE magazine authors. And today we are joined by April Zawlocki. April is an assistant professor of education at the College of DuPage, and she's also an educational consultant specifically dealing with grading and assessment. And of course, a great author to this wonderful article. And also, she's just a nice person. That's also, it's the bonus. So yes, the article is "What Have Rubrics Got to Do with It?" So we want to hear more about it. So we appreciate your time, April. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, so we're going to start right off with the questions. So your passion and knowledge about assessment is clear from the beginning of your article. Why are you so passionate about this topic? What inspires you to write about it?
Well, my husband and I have been exploring grading for a number of years now, and I think what really inspired me was the fact that in my pre-service training, before I became a classroom teacher, I didn't have any training on grading at all. And so when I got into the classroom, I just did what had been done to me. And so I didn't know really too much about why I did what I did. And so once I started reading, I read one book in particular and started thinking about, why do we, give people a 0? Why do we use these incredible rubrics? What's the purpose of them? And I started to really think about how that shaped my classroom and my students, how they were learning. And I just think that we could do better. So that's what drives me, is just doing the best that we can for students. And I think we have a lot of room to grow in the area.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, it sounds like, obviously the foundation of your work is what's doing best for kids, which is what it should be for all of us. So thank you for that nice reminder. And it's, I think, a wonderful message that making a better path for assessment begins with assessing your own knowledge about the subject itself. So it sounds like a very wonderful, thoughtful journey for you.
Mm-hmm. Well, a big part of standards-based grading and looking at rubrics the way we do is the self-assessment piece. Mm-hmm. And so it really does start with the teacher. And so that was where it started with me, at looking at myself and how I can do it. And I'm constantly reevaluating what I do and all of that.
Right. And part of being, like you said, being a critical participant in the craft of teaching and instruction begins with being innovative. So why is it so important for in the middle level, in particular, for teachers to be more innovative with grading and assessment?
Well, I think something that we hear all the time, and being a middle school teacher myself, was we're preparing students for high school, like in college. That's our main job, right? And sometimes we forget that there are students right now. This is their real world right now, happening right before us. And if we are constantly just looking to the next level, we're forgetting everything that's happening in the middle school that's shaping these kids into adults. And so I think really digging our heels in at the middle level is where it needs to really start to happen. We do see some of this happening already at the elementary schools. And then for some reason, this transition happens where we start assessing differently as they start to enter late elementary and into middle school. And when you think about motivation and keeping students engaged in the classroom and learning, that's really what assessing in a different way allows students to do. It allows them to be much more engaged. It allows the teachers to focus on learning as opposed to evaluating so much, or sorting students, as Gusky likes to say. So I think that we need to make the change. We need to be the ones to stand up to the high schools and say, we're doing what's best for students. We're developing students. We're creating critical thinkers through a different type of assessment. I think we could really see a lot of gains very quickly if we just started shifting our mindset and started to move a little bit from a traditional method of assessment.
Right, and like you said, it's across the continuum of education. So we can't, obviously we're focused on the middle level here with AMLE, but the conversation about revolutionizing or making a more progressive grading and assessment philosophy is something that needs to be discussed K through 12 and into higher ed probably as well. you know, so.
Yeah, I do have these, I teach at the college, and I do use these same grading practices in my college classrooms. So my students who are future teachers are familiar with this method of assessment. And I will tell you, I see a very, even though they have been in school for 18, plus years, I'm able to break that mindset. And so if I can do it at the college, I'm very confident that we can do it at the middle level. And I have done it at the middle level. Right. And I've seen that change. It's with students. It's incredible.
Cool. Well, in your article, you talk about how rubrics fit into this whole conversation. And I was interested in particular that, traditionally we think about rubrics as tied to specific assignments, like a rubric you might have for an essay or for a project or something like that. But you talk about rubrics tied to life skills. So how do rubrics that are tied to life skills help students and middle schools as a whole?
Well, I think once I started incorporating those types of rubrics into my assessment, we started to have very different conversations. So on assignments, they would have students would receive a score based on the standard, but then they'd also receive a score for the life skills. So for each assessment, they would get a score for turning work in on time. So as I'm collecting data on my students, I would know if they were chronically turning things in late, or if they were always on time, or if they struggled in a different area. When I talk to people about producing successful participants in the community, they talk about things like critical thinking, cooperation, collaboration. No one really says, oh, you've got to have this specific skill or that specific skill, unless you're going to go into a specific area. But when we're talking about developing the whole child and developing students as individuals, those pieces, those life skills are critical to their development. I know even as a mom and as a parent, I want to see my students, I want to know that they're being successful in those areas. And traditional assessment doesn't tell us anything about that. So using those life skill rubrics is really important.
Right, and it broadens the conversation about, what learning is. It's not just content mastery, but you're talking about, life mastery as well.
Right.
Another stakeholder that comes into the conversation is, school leaders and school administrators. What can school leaders do to promote this kind of assessment innovation? What can they do to help?
Well, I think the first, a good place to start is examining things like giving students zeros and allowing extra credit. But I really do think if schools could just start with having those life skill rubrics consistent along in their middle schools, 6-8, 5-8, whatever it is, you would see a significant change in those conversations about student learning. So you can have those rubrics based on your PBIS frameworks. You could have them based on any kinds of life skills that you find important in your community. And if you can implement those, like I said, authentically, 6-8, have all of your teachers at all the different levels on board and assessing those, I think you would see a major change. I know that you would see a major change. And it also just brings those conversations to the forefront. They aren't left to, I think that this student can or turn stuff in consistently. The conversation becomes, I know that your student is successful in this area, but I also know that we need to develop this other area. So those conversations are so much more rich, and you really learn a lot more about your students that way.
Exactly. Yeah. And clearly with when you mentioned like getting everybody on the same page, all teachers working through this, at the same time and all, making sure this is happening from a leadership perspective, that's an evolutionary process. It's a revolutionary process, but having, making sure that it's deliberate and that you've got a reasonable and feasible timeline to make that all happen, because it's not going to happen overnight.
Right, absolutely. Well, the nice thing too about the life skills is that a lot of times they can just pull their PBIS framework or some other framework that they have, character counts or something like that, So these are already things that schools are having discussions about. It's just formalizing them and assessing students based on those ideas that you and values that you already hold dear in your schools. So it's changing the conversation from just, you know, this is a matrix on my wall to, you know, this is important and we're going to be constantly looking at these things.
Yeah, that's terrific. That is a very smart way to do it. And clearly you're an advanced learner, April. And so I think you're ready. I think you're ready for the metaphorical test.
Uh-oh.
Are you ready? Are you ready
so.
for the food-based metaphor that we all know and love? Here we go. Are you ready?
Ready.
All right, so April, if standards-based rubrics were a food for middle-level education, what kind of food would they be and why?
So since I'm an advanced learner, I get to bend the question a little bit. So I would say that it's not a specific food, rather it's a balanced meal. How's that?
That is a winner. Go ahead.
There we go. So I think that it's important to have everything represented. You can't eat just one food. You have to have a little bit of everything. So formative, summative, life skills, your standard skills, all of your academic skills, all of that, all wrapped up into a balanced meal.
Very nice. And how we assess our health and wellness educationally needs to also be balanced too. There you go.
Yep,
wow.
Absolutely.
See, I knew it. And your life skills are also, you know, very, very good as well if we measure it that way too. I'm not surprised that you hit it out of the park. Well done. So, well, gosh, thank you so much, April, for taking some more time to, you know, dig into this very critical topic. Clearly, your expertise is invaluable and unflappable. You are a proponent of this, and so we appreciate you adding to our content here in AMLE Magazine and adding to our content right up here in the old cookie jar. So, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, and thank you, AMLE Magazine readers, for joining us on this hangout and for checking out this article in AMLE Magazine, where we help you reach every student, grow professionally, and create great schools. All right, thanks so much. Thanks, April.
Thank you. Bye-bye.